Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is basically an ancient, high-stakes thriller. We're talking absolute loyalty, extreme danger, and a secret code that literally meant the difference between life and death. We're diving into one of the most famous narratives in ancient literature, the story of David and Jonathan, and how they navigated a seriously deadly political minefield.
So, let's just jump right in. We drop into the story right as David is fleeing for his life. He's just barely escaped a compound called Naoth and Ramah, and he is bewildered, he's terrified, and he drops this incredibly heavy reality onto his best friend Jonathan. He asks him, "What have I done? What is my sin before your father that he's trying to kill me?" And then he sums up his absolute panic with this profound, chilling realization. He says, "There is but a step between me and death."
So that brings us to part one, a step from death, looking at this immediate threat.
And right out of the gate, we get this brilliant illustration of their conflict. You've got Jonathan's desperate denial on one hand, clashing with David's grim reality on the other. You see, Jonathan insists that his father, King Saul, would never do anything great or small without telling him first. But David has to snap his friend back to reality. He points out, "Look, your dad knows exactly how much you care about me, so of course he's keeping this murder plot a secret so you aren't grieved." David is operating in the very real, very dangerous world of political assassination, while Jonathan is kind of still just hoping for the best.
Which leads us to part two, the sacred covenant, exploring a bond beyond blood.
Now, to really understand this dynamic, we have to look way beyond just a simple friendship. These two were bound by a formal covenant of the Lord. Think of it as a sacred, ironclad oath of absolute mutual loyalty that actually defied royal bloodlines. Jonathan literally tells David, "Whatever your soul desires, I will even do it for you." It's a total, unwavering commitment to protect one another, recognizing not just the peril David is in right now, but his eventual rise to power.
And here is where we get a really fascinating twist in this covenant. Jonathan actually secures a promise from David to protect Jonathan's future family forever. I mean, just think about that for a second. Jonathan is the crown prince. He's the heir to the throne, yet he is the one asking a fugitive for future mercy. They swear this huge oath of generational loyalty, proving that Jonathan truly loved David as his own soul. He is inextricably tying his entire family's fate to David's survival.
Let's move to part three, the secret arrow code, or as I like to think of it, espionage in antiquity.
So with their sacred covenant renewed in the field, they need a plan. And they come up with this absolutely ingenious three-step espionage tactic to pass along vital survival info. Because obviously, David can't just stroll back into the palace. If Saul is mad, David is dead. Instead, David is going to hide out in the field by the stone Ezel for 3 days. Meanwhile, Jonathan will go to the royal feast, gauge his father's mood, and then come back. To safely communicate what he finds out, Jonathan creates a super clever cover story. He's just going to go out for some archery practice with a young servant boy.
It's basically a perfect, undetectable binary code. Here's how it works. Jonathan will shoot 3 arrows. If he yells to the servant boy who's fetching them, "Behold, the arrows are on this side of thee," well, David will hear that from his hiding spot and know that there's peace and it's safe to return. But if Jonathan shouts, "Behold, the arrows are beyond thee," that's it. That is the ultimate red alert. It means the Lord has sent him away and David has to flee immediately. And the brilliant part? To anyone watching, it literally just sounds like routine archery instructions.
Okay, part four, the king's wrath and the ticking clock.
You can really feel the tension escalating over these 3 agonizing days. Jonathan is sitting at the royal feast next to a literal ticking time bomb, his father, King Saul. On day 1 of the new moon feast, David's seat is conspicuously empty. Saul doesn't say anything. He just assumes David is ceremonially unclean. But then, day 2 rolls around, and the seat is empty again. The tension in that room must have been thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Saul snaps, turns to Jonathan, and demands to know why the son of Jesse hasn't shown up.
This is the moment. Jonathan delivers their carefully rehearsed alibi, specifically designed to test Saul's reaction. He tells the king that David earnestly begged for permission to run down to Bethlehem for a mandatory yearly family sacrifice. He even throws in that David's brother actually commanded him to be there. This is the trap. If Saul just says, "Okay, it is well," they know he means no harm. But if he explodes in anger, well, they have their definitive answer.
And wow, do we ever get our answer? The king's response is downright explosive. Saul's anger is instantly kindled, and he violently insults his own son for his loyalty to David. I mean, he doesn't just get mad, he gets totally venomous. He screams at Jonathan, calling him the son of the perverse, rebellious woman. He actively accuses Jonathan of choosing David to his own total confusion and shame.
What we're seeing here is a massive clash of worldviews. It is ruthless political survival going head-to-head with steadfast moral loyalty. Saul flat out tells Jonathan, look, as long as the son of Jesse lives, your kingdom will never be established. He sees David purely as a political threat that needs to be eliminated. But Jonathan? He's operating entirely on the moral logic of that sacred covenant they made. He stands his ground and just asks his dad, why should he be slain? What has he even done?
While Saul doesn't exactly answer that logical question with words, instead he answers by literally hurling a javelin right across the dinner table, trying to smite his own son. In that one terrifying, chaotic second, Jonathan's denial is completely shattered. The text tells us Jonathan stood up from the table in fierce anger. He refused to eat, deeply grieved for David, and totally ashamed of his father's actions. The test was over. It was obvious. Saul wanted blood.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, An Enduring Bond and the Final Farewell.
So it's the morning of the third day. Jonathan goes out to the field with his young lad right near the stone ezel where David is hiding. Jonathan shoots the arrow and cries out the code, "Is not the arrow beyond thee?" And then he adds this incredibly urgent, desperate plea. He shouts, "Make speed, haste, stay not." Now the young lad just thinks he's being told to hurry up and grab the arrows. But David, listening from the brush, he hears the dreadful truth. The code has been given. He has to run.
Once the boy gathers the arrows, Jonathan hands his weapons over, sends him back to the city, and the second they are completely alone and out of sight of the king's spies, David emerges. The sheer gravity of the moment just hits them both. David falls on his face, bowing to the ground 3 times, showing this immense respect to the prince who literally just saved his life. And then the emotional dam just breaks. They embrace, they kiss one another, and they weep bitterly together. They both know their lives will never, ever be the same.
As they part ways, Jonathan's final words to David beautifully reaffirm their generational covenant. Even in the middle of this extreme panic, Jonathan centers them both right back on that sacred mutual promise they made. He says, "Go in peace, forasmuch as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord." It's just this incredibly powerful moment of absolute trust. David departs into exile, and Jonathan turns around to face his father back in the dangerous city.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought about the true nature of absolute loyalty. In a world completely driven by self-preservation and political power, what does it actually mean to love someone as your own soul? Jonathan literally had everything to lose: a crown, a kingdom, his father's favor. And yet he chose truth and a sacred mutual covenant over political convenience. Thanks so much for diving into this incredible ancient narrative with me today, and keep exploring the depths of these timeless stories.